everybody, this is Audrey, also known as Noble Strength, and welcome back to my channel. And you are tuned in for Storytime. If you're new to my channel, you know that I love to do thrift hauls, I like to do devotionals, and I also like to share art. Well, I've included this series of story times to kind of go along with my faith part of my channel, because I really believe that it's important to know that God is there. He's always there, waiting to have a relationship with you, waiting to, talk to you and for you to get to know him, because he knows us, but he just wants us to, reach out to him and, have that relationship with him. So my stories that I'm going to be sharing are just stories of how God has spoken to me in my life in various situations and circumstances, because he loves us so much. So he's always there. And you just have to be, understanding that he's loving, he's kind, he wants to get to know you. And as a Christian, I have gotten to know God, and I'm still getting to know him through reading the Bible, through prayer, and just, talking to him like I would anybody else that I love and care about. So just think of talking to God just as with your husband, your child, your sister, your brother. Just like they are there interacting with you throughout the day at various times, so is God. And a lot of times we miss him. We're distracted by the things of society. We get distracted by social media, technology. Things kind of take away from us, talking to him. We don't unplug enough. We don't, isolate ourselves, often enough to be still and be quiet to hear from him. So I'm not saying that the only time you can hear from him is in isolation, but we do have to take time to go off to ourselves to truly hear him at times. So anyway, this story took place, this actual story, happening to me, took place this summer, just a few months ago. This past July, I was in Memphis, my hometown, visiting my mom and just having a great time. I have to say, I love going back home. I have such great childhood memories of Memphis and growing up, having my aunts and uncles and cousins there. So when I go home, it's always a joy to go back. So having said all of that, I was in Memphis, and I was not too far from where my mother lives. She lives kind of in the heart of Memphis, in the city. And I was at a gas station. I had just left the bank and had gotten some cash, and I had gone in and put $20 down on the pump so that I could get some gas. So I was coming back out to pump the gas in my car, and this man approached me and asked if I had any money that I could give him because he wanted to get something to eat. And I had, like I said, had just gotten like $40 out. I put 20 on the pump, and I only had a solid 20 and some change in my purse, and I didn't want to break the 20 or just give him the whole 20. So I looked in my purse, and I did have some change, so I decided to give him what I had in change. So I was going in my wallet and getting out the money, and he was invading my private space. He was really close. It was like he was trying to see what I had in my wallet to take out to give him. So I was kind of trying to hide, so he wouldn't be all in my wallet. And so I emptied out the change, and it was a mixture of silver coins and pennies. And so I just gave him all that there was. And there probably was like $1 and some change in coins, because I know there were some quarters and dimes and nickels and pennies in there. So I gave him what I had, and he looked a bit, ungrateful or perturbed by me only giving him change. But hey, it is what it is. That's what I gave him. So I went about going ahead and pumping my gas. Well, in my peripheral vision, I could see that he was still kind of hovering around not too far from my car. And he was like, going through the change. Next thing I know, I hear coins hitting the ground, like just a bunch of coins hitting the ground. And I'm like, did he just throw the money I gave him on the ground? So I looked up, and he was walking away, and going across the street. Well, I looked down on the ground and he had thrown all of the pennies that I had given him down on the ground. And when I tell you, he threw them down forcefully because they were like scattered all over and they were rolling, on the ground. And I was like, I cannot believe this guy just pulled out all the pennies and threw them down on the ground. How ungrateful is that? So I'm done pumping my gas, and I don't know why my mind's always racing with thoughts, but I guess your mind never shuts off. But I'm thinking, oh, they're just pennies. I'm just going to leave them down there. Somebody else will come by and pick them up. Because I have this friend who, if she sees any kind of coin on the ground, whether it's a penny, a dime, or whatever, she's picking it up. And I'm like, girl, that's just a penny. And I caught myself like thinking, should I pick them up or should I leave them down? They're just pennies. And then it was this strong impression in my spirit, pick up the pennies. And I was like, but they're not, I'm having this inner conversation like, but pennies aren't really worth much. And it was like, again, this strong impression in my spirit, pick up the pennies and count them as you pick them up. So at first it was just pick up the pennies. Then the second time it was pick up the pennies and count them as you pick them up. So I bend down, I start picking up the pennies and I'm counting 1, 2. By the time I pick up all of the pennies, there were 12 pennies. And so I'm like, that was God putting that in me, but I don't understand why he wanted me to pick them up and why he wanted me to count them. So I'm, getting back in my car and I'm having this conversation with God internally, like, God, why did you want me to pick up those pennies? I really want to understand what the importance was of picking up those pennies. Well, I did not get an immediate answer. So that goes to show you that sometimes you can ask God for things, you won't immediately get an answer. But I never let that go because I knew it was him impressing upon me to pick those up. So, weeks go by and I'm still thinking about, why did he have me pick up those pennies? And I remember that same day I had gone to the store and bought some things, and I had given, the lady said it was whatever dollars and some change, and I think it was like 10 cents. And so I was able to use 10 of the 12 pennies to pay for whatever I had. But I really didn't think much of it at the time. But then God, later answered me, and he impressed upon me that the reason why he wanted me to pick up the pennies and count them is because they had value. As worthless as those pennies may have seemed to me, they did have value and were useful, even though at the moment I didn't see any use in wasting my time picking them up. They still came in handy when it came time to purchasing something and I needed 10 cents. At that time, they served a purpose, so they did have value. So the value and the use of them may not have been evident to me and clear to me, like I said, at the time, but God showed me that they did have value. And oftentimes we throw away things thinking that, they're not of any good, but they have value. And then he brought me to the verses, several verses, that is, in the Bible, specifically dealing with the 12 disciples. So, let's see here. So really this lesson to me is about what your worth or your value is. In Matthew 10, Jesus is talking to his disciples. Jesus called together his 12 disciples. He gave them the power to force out evil spirits and to heal every kind of disease and sickness. Jesus' acceptance is available to anyone, is what I got out of that. No matter, these are 12 disciples. They were minding their own business, doing their everyday things. Some were fishermen who would go out and fish. But he personally came to them and chose each and every one of them because he saw value in those men. And there was a purpose that he had for each one of those disciples that he personally chose. So we must believe, and this is what I have in my notes based on what God was telling me, that we must believe that Jesus can use ordinary people just like you and me to do extraordinary work, just as he did with those disciples. So we all have value. Do not underestimate your value and your worth. You know, other people may look at you and think, oh, there's not much to you. There's no, sometimes people befriend people for what they can get out of them or whatever, but you don't need people like that in your life. For God created us, and we all have worth, and we're all fearfully and wonderfully made, and we all have value. I can't stress that enough. And another thing that God pointed out to me in that scenario after talking to him was that there's no telling where those pennies had been, like, prior to being thrown on the ground. They were created with a purpose. Those pennies had probably transferred from this hand to another. They had probably helped someone to purchase this or whatever in the past. So they probably had gone through a lot. Some may have ended up on the ground before and had been picked up and then ended up with me. But you see, they had been around, even though they each had their own story, they each served a purpose at some point in time. And then the 12 disciples that Jesus chose came from many walks of life, and that's what I was kind of tying the pennies into. And they had value and purpose for him. Let's read further in John 6:68 through 70. Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Also, we have come to believe and know that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered them, did I not choose you, the 12? And one of you is a devil. So God even realized or knew or wanted us to understand that even the person who's the betrayer had a purpose. Judas even had a purpose and value in bringing forth the prophecy that, Jesus Christ would come as a sacrificial lamb and give up his life for all humanity. So even Judas served his purpose and had value, the one that, everybody looks down upon. So out of the 12, they all had purpose and they all had a value. So that is my story of the 12 pennies and how we all have worth, and how those 12 pennies even had worth, and how God used that situation and circumstance of that man casting down those pennies and not being grateful and thinking they were worthless. And God used that situation to show me that we all have value, we all have worth. It's not that I didn't know it, but I just wanted to share that with you, that he will even, bring back to remembrance. Because like I said, I was like, they're not anything, but God used that to teach me. Don't ever look down on something and think it's worthless. Don't ever, because, or a person especially, because we all have a purpose and there's value in us all. Even the ones who wreak havoc in your life have served a purpose for the greater good, to make you a stronger person. You've learned some lessons from that evil person, or that, a terrible person, a person that's mistreated you. You've learned something from that. God has made something good out of it. So every time I pick up a penny, or every time I see a penny now, I look at it totally different than I did before. So I probably won't be passing up too many more pennies in the future. I'll be like my friend who's always picking up pennies and dimes. But anyway, that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was encouraging to you as a believer, or even as a non-believer. Even if you're not a Christian, I hope that this encouraged you to know your worth. And if you're not a believer, I encourage you to, take a chance on Christ and get to know him. Ask him into your life. You can do it. I tell you, I don't regret any minute of asking Christ into my life, into my heart. He's changed it, and he's making it better and better. Even through adversity and trials and tough times, I can still rejoice and have joy. So thanks again for tuning in. I love you guys, and